Welcome to another episode of a Trip of a Lifetime podcast with me, Celeste. Jasmine's not here for this podcast and she won't be for a little while because she's busy with work and a lot of other things. So she's allowed me to carry on with some guest hosts. So I am joined by Helena.
Hi, I just realized I should probably say that. Hello.
Um, we go to university together. Um, yeah, so in terms of Doctor Who, uh what made you start watching it?
Well, like my dad had all the box sets when I was a kid, and like he's got almost all of the DVDs, like from the first Doctor, like up till now.
Hmm.
Um, and I just kind of stole his Christopher Eccleston one, and I just watched it when I
Yeah.
was about 10, and I was like, this is good.
Mm. Who's your favorite Doctor?
I think like purely for nostalgia, Christopher Eccleston, but
Mm.
um I also really like the Peter Capaldi episodes. I think
Yeah.
it's, yeah, one of my favorites as well.
Mm. What about companions?
Um, I think the Tennant era companions are probably my favorite. Like
Hmm.
obviously Rose,
Yeah.
Martha, Donna. Um, but I think my favorite of all time is Sarah Jane.
Hmm.
Sarah Jane Smith. I think she's like the icon. She's
Yeah.
the most iconic companion of the whole series. Yeah, I think she's definitely my favorite.
Hmm. Great. So, uh, we should probably get on with the episode itself. So,
Mhm.
Rise of the Cyberman and Age of Steel, the two-part Cyberman episode of series two. The episodes were released on the 13th and 20th of May 2006, respectively. It was written by Tom McRae or McRae, directed by Graham Harper, who, interestingly enough, is the only director to have worked on both New Who and Classic Who, as a director. Because I think he directed some Fifth Doctor and some Sixth Doctor stories.
Yeah, I think he did Caves of Androzani.
Mm,
Yeah.
yeah, I have watched next to no Classic Who. I'm going to be honest. It's something I want to rectify, but I don't have BritBox and the DVDs are expensive, so
Yeah.
it is something that I want to get around to doing. But because I do want to um watch it in preferably in chronological order.
Yeah.
Um, and that's just I think I just need to bite the bullet and buy a subscription to BritBox at some point. But
I think
yeah.
it's something you have to put a lot of energy into as well. Like they're
Mm,
not as well, like the earlier episodes in particular, they're not quite as accessible as the new ones
mm,
are. Like you have to really focus on what's happening.
definitely. Although I have watched the first part of The Unearthly Child, and I did actually quite enjoy that.
Yeah.
So this is the first Cyberman episode of the revival. So this is introducing this iconic villain to a whole load of young kids. I mean, this is the first Cyberman episode I watched. I don't know about you.
Mhm.
Um, I mean, I didn't watch it when it aired, but
No.
yeah,
I was like three.
yeah. But I think it does a pretty good job of that.
Yeah.
Like, there's definitely some references to Mondas and the fact that this
Mm.
the Doctors encountered them before. I mean, they mention Rose mentions that she saw one of their heads in the Van Staten Museum in Dalek.
Yeah.
Um, and so the Doctor mentions that, and so it's a little reference for the classic fans, but it's also not something that any new fans need to know to understand the story. It's not
Yeah.
bogging the narrative down in all of this lore. It's just like a reference of this happened, and now, I mean, not that that's currently relevant, but we're acknowledging that this was a thing, and now this is how they are in this new series. What did you think of the design of
I
them?
think. Honestly, they used to absolutely terrify me as a kid. Like it's the sound of the footsteps,
Yeah.
like the mechanical, like rhythmic stomping, I think is just so ominous.
Mm,
Um, and I think like as well physically, like obviously you can tell that there's at least used to be a person like where they are now. Um, I think it works really well. Like obviously like different to the previous well like designs.
mm,
But I think that works, especially as like with the context of what like John Lumick, like the guy that
yeah.
created what he was trying to do with them. Like he wanted to be like better, so he's obviously gonna have it complete metal, like oh yeah.
Mm,
I actually really like them. I think they're really cool, but also really creepy.
yeah. Right. So let's go back to the start of the episode.
Mhm.
Right, because it's a cold open, with Lumic talking to some random technician who's talking about like trying to convince him of the ethics of the situation. Obviously gets killed, but it as a viewer, I mean, first of all, that death comes very quickly, like
Yeah,
like that. As soon as the episode starts, I've completely forgotten how quickly they're like, setting the tone of how dark this two part is going to be.
yeah,
Um, but also, what's interesting is, I mean, obviously, because we're rewatching it, we know that it's a parallel world,
yeah,
but the audience at the time wouldn't have known that. And it's just interesting how, the cold open makes it seem like it is Earth, not the parallel Earth.
yeah. I think as well, like I read somewhere that like it was meant to start a different way originally, and like
Hmm.
like decided to do that instead. I think it does like work really well for the episode, and I
Yeah.
think especially like I do not when I was rewatching it, I did not remember the episode being as dark as it was. Like
Mm.
as a two-parter, I was like, whoa, this is really heavy.
Yeah.
Um, but I think as well, like it pretty much just, especially for like older fans, like you basically go in, especially after the credits have gone, and it's like just like beat for beat, it's like, oh, TARDIS, like something's wrong with the TARDIS. TARDIS is dead. They go
Mm.
outside, they're in London. No, they're not. It's parallel London. Also Pete Tyler's alive. Like everything is just really quickly. It's like, you know why we're here. We know why we're here. Let's just get straight into it, basically.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I think it's quite like intense, obviously, if it's the first time you're watching it, if you don't know anything about it
Mm.
before, but I think it does quite a good job of like condensing all of that like exposition in the world building just into like the first like 10-15 minutes of the episode.
Well, yeah, because I think any sci-fi fan knows the concept of a parallel world. And even
Yeah,
if you don't, it's not that difficult to understand it because it's like it's
yeah,
our world, but slightly different. And yeah, Russell and Tim Gray were very good at kind of, giving you these changes quite quickly. So
mm,
you had obviously Rose not existing and Pete and Jackie having a dog called Rose
yeah,
instead. You had obviously Pete being alive, Jackie being, I mean, them being rich rather than being,
mm,
on a cancer state. But
yeah,
also how Pete's seems very similar to the version we see in Father's Day,
yeah,
just with more money. And whereas you've got Jackie who's did not adjust to the change well at all. Like she's
no,
awful to anyone who isn't the same class as her. But
I
yeah,
think, yeah, sorry.
no, no, you go on.
I was gonna say like I think it shows quite early on as well. Like you get sort of an idea of how the episode is gonna, well, the two-part is gonna end. Like
Mm,
when they show the differences between like Pete and Jackie, and like kind of how one of them is the same as he was in the other universe, but one of
yeah.
them is very different. You kind of get an inkling of like, okay, maybe they're not both gonna make it out.
Mm,
And I think especially like all of the obviously a lot of it's like planting like seeds for the later episodes.
yeah.
And I think it is definitely like rewatching it with all of that in mind is definitely you see it in a very different light. Like how they really obviously made
Mm.
sure that they did not have any children so that Rose could kind of like fit herself in there quite nicely.
But also that these two, that this Pete and this Jackie would get in the middle of getting a divorce as well.
Yeah,
So it's like, because obviously we know that Pete's the same, pretty much the same as the other Pete, just more emotionally mature with like more money.
yeah,
Whereas Jackie, it seems to be like this Pete and that Jackie from the parallel universe don't no longer get along because of how much they've changed.
yeah,
Whereas it feels like, the Jackie of Rose's world, of the original Doctor Who world, would fit in a lot better with that Pete, and we know that happens at the end,
mm,
in Doomsday when they reunite. Not to spoil too much. And so, yeah, there's definitely quite a bit of foreshadowing, especially, I mean, we're skipping very far to the end of this two-parter
yeah,
quickly, but um, how Rose really wants him to come with them so he can, because she wants that nuclear family that she's never actually experienced.
yeah,
Um, I mean, I kind of feel sorry for Pete because as much as his reaction does hurt Rose a lot, it's understandable. I mean, he's so
yeah.
overwhelmed with everything that's just happened.
Like his wife's just died. Like he's lost like basically his entire like business stake in anything
Mm.
ever. Like he has to now go and make sure this doesn't happen anywhere else. Oh, and also I'm your daughter from a parallel universe where you're dead. Like it's a bit much for him to take on in like
Yeah,
24 hours.
it's kind of like the last straw. And like it's totally understandable. It's also understandable why Rose would tell him. Like
Yeah,
it just, you know, she's longing for that connection and she's had it in her sights twice now and it's been
yeah,
pulled away from her. Um, so it makes sense that she would try to cling on to him.
yeah.
But
It's like the
and
third time she has to go through her dad
yeah.
dying as well. Like it's
Mm.
rough.
But it's also kind of showcasing because Rose is quite a selfish character in terms of, you know, she, unlike people like Martha or even Donna, who kind of tend to put
Mm,
others' needs before their own, they can look at a situation and go, okay, yeah, maybe doing that kind of thing isn't the best idea. But equally, these two, they're not in the same situation as Rose. They're both a lot old, quite a bit older. Like Martha's in
yeah,
her late 20s, early 30s, and Donna's in her somewhere in her 30s. Um,
yeah,
but also they both grew up with both parents, even if Donna's father, I mean, he's in The Runaway Bride, but the actor who played him passed away around the time of the filming of Series 4, so which is why they replaced that character of her dad with Wilf.
mm,
Um, so, neither of them have that kind of person that they need, that's missing from their life. Um, so it's understandable, and in a way, I quite like it about Rose, but it can also get quite frustrating at times as well, because you're looking at it going, "No, don't do that. That's that. No, don't." But equally, if I was in her position and if I had never met my father, maybe I'd also do that. I don't know.
yeah. But yeah, I think like obviously she was only 19 like when she left with the doctor in like
Mm.
season one. Um
I mean,
so like you
that's how
can
old I am now, so
yeah,
yeah,
like I can to like if I suddenly got like whipped off to a parallel universe where my dad was alive and
mm,
like they didn't have a kid, I'd be like, by the way, you guys, this is really funny. I'm actually from a parallel universe where I'm your daughter.
yeah.
Like it wouldn't I fit in so well in this lifestyle? It's like it's obviously like the way she kind of acts with Jackie, well, like parallel Jackie,
Yeah.
like outside is like really like upsetting because like you're watching it going like I know this isn't gonna end well, but like I can understand why she wants them to like to stay together so
Mm.
badly. Um,
But
but
it's
yeah,
also like because she sees when she looks at this parallel Jackie, it's almost like briefly she forgets that this isn't her Jackie, so
Yeah.
that she realizes that to Jackie this is a stranger that's talking.
Mm.
So yeah, I agree. You definitely know that it's not going to go particularly well. Right, well, let's talk about Mickey as a character because
Yes.
at the end of the day, as much as there's a lot about Rose, and there's obviously it's a Sideman episode, I feel like this episode is mostly about Mickey. I feel like if any character is the protagonist of this two-parter, I feel like it is him because he
Yeah.
goes through the most amount of development. I think we learn more about Mickey in this episode than we learn about him in pretty much any other episode.
Yeah.
So after the title sequence, we're in the TARDIS. Mickey's still pressing this button whilst Rose and the
Yeah.
Doctor are talking about, places they've been. And I mean, the Doctor literally uses, Mickey asks him about it, literally uses the line, "You have to be there," which, like, ouch. Like, that's like the worst phrase to hear when two of your friends are talking about
Yeah.
something they did together.
It's like your like sort of ex-girlfriend, sort of not, and now she's with her new guy, sort of not, and like you're
Yeah,
just kind of there pressing this button, even though you don't have to be. Like
yeah,
this episode, like his relationship with the Doctor obviously is like really like tenuous,
yeah.
obviously in relation to Rose, because like I mean, it'd be weird if it wasn't really. Like
Mm.
some guy shows up, takes away your girlfriend, she comes back and she like a year later after you've been like questioned for her murder and everything. Like it's fair enough that he's like kind of feeling a bit on edge. And like obviously he uses when him and Rose are going in separate directions and he's like to the Doctor, he's like, obviously you're gonna go after her, like I'm just the spare part.
Mm.
Um which like obviously was like kind of an Easter egg for um the story was like kind of inspired by I think it was the Big
Yeah,
Finish
spare
spare parts.
parts. Yeah.
Like which is like a nice little Easter egg, but also like really makes you realize like how badly they do treat Mickey.
But I
Um,
think I think in a way, as an audience, we've always known, but it's a bit like Mickey in terms of his relationship with Rose, is that up like even in the last episode, The Garden, the Fireplace,
mm,
he's still kind of because the Doctor's flirting with the Renette and kind of interested in her, and Mickey's playing up on that and is really trying to manipulate Rose in a way.
yeah,
Um, because he's still hanging on to the hope that she will choose him. And it's only in this episode that he finally. Well, I mean, I think he's known for ages, but he's finally
like
let
come to terms
go.
with it.
Yeah. What else about Mickey? I mean, the other thing to do with Mickey that's in this is him meeting Ricky, who is
Yeah,
his alternate universe self, who is I mean, obviously never met Rose because Rose doesn't exist. Grew up still around the Powell Estate area with the same grandmother. His dad's still left. His mum, I'm presuming she passed away, and it's kind of implied that she committed suicide. But
I think so.
yeah, um, and pretty much everything else is the same except he's named Ricky and he's a lot um tougher in a way, although I would still say that a lot of that is still a mask. I don't think he is that much
Yeah,
tougher. I think a lot of it is just bravado and trying to make himself
yeah,
look big.
definitely. I think
Yeah.
um sorry,
No, you
but
go
I
ahead.
think as well like obviously his kind of Rose influence is Jake instead.
Mm,
And I think like obviously Mickey growing up like with the influence of Rose kind of helped him become a little bit like more soft almost.
yeah.
Like he kind of he's a lot more comfortable, like if a bit like of an idiot sometimes, but like at least he's kind of aware of it, if that makes sense. Um, but like with the influence of Jake, like it's really like they're really tight, but like kind of almost not like competing, but like kind of close in the way that guys are when they're like I don't know what the word is. Like they don't have like a feminine influence apart from obviously Mrs. Moore, who's
Mm,
like a lot older than them, so almost more like a mother figure almost instead of like a friend their age, if that makes
yeah.
sense. So I think definitely like the lack of Rose impacts more than just Pete and Jackie in this. Like it kind of shows how important she is as a character, if that makes sense. I don't know
Yeah.
where I was going with that, to be honest. I feel
No,
like
I
I ended that
understand what
quite
you mean.
well.
I also think, I mean, there's some subtext in here that I don't think I've ever picked up on before. That, after Mickey shows back up after Ricky's been killed by the Cybermen,
Mm,
that Jake's reaction is a lot more, I don't know, visceral than that of just a friend. Like,
yeah,
there's definitely some gay subtext there.
definitely. I put that in my notes as well.
Yeah.
Like he reacts like more to Ricky's death than Pete does to Jackie's.
Yeah.
Like,
Although I would argue a lot of Pete's reaction to Jackie's is internalized. Though
yeah,
I don't
he
think,
kind of doesn't have time.
yeah.
But also, like, yeah, I especially as the actor that plays Jake, Andrew Hayden Smith, like obviously himself is like gay in real life. And I
Mm,
don't know if that like kind of maybe influenced the way he acted it or influenced the way I thought about it. But like I think just the relationship between Jake and Ricky, especially when he first picked Mickey up in that van, thinks he's Jake, and he's like, "Oh my God, like we've been so worried about you. Like, what are you doing?"
mm,
I think is like definitely more of a like worried, not spouse, but like like kind of
yeah.
romantic interest instead of just a best friend.
Yeah. But there's also the way he reacts around Mickey after Ricky's died because he's very much like, oh, because Mickey's very much like, I'm not going to replace him. I'm a different person. I know I look like
Mm,
him, and it's you know there is definitely some subtext there, and I mean I don't know whether it was intentional or not. It could have been the director. It could have been the actor himself because I'm not convinced it would have been written in the script. But
no,
also, given that this is Russell writing it, it might have been a thing that he thought about, oh, I could do this, but I won't because, the BBC at this time is a bit
yeah, iffy.
about gay rep. Because obviously like Torchwood, which comes out not long after this series,
Mm,
has a lot of gay representation,
yeah,
although like explicit like labels aren't don't tend to be explicit. They're just all kind of bisexual, really.
yeah,
But and I mean, we do get in Parting Ways, or was it Bad Wolf? It was one of those two. Jack kissing both Rose and the Doctor. So we did
yeah,
get that, and we do know that Jack is very obviously queer, but
yeah.
that is the most explicit we get up until I think Jenny and Vasta really are the main two like big
Yeah. And even
like
then, the representation at times is not great. But
mm,
I think that's obviously a Stephen Moffat issue with his writing with female characters in general,
yeah.
instead of like a overarching BBC thing.
Mm. Now going back to kind of like the Cybermen technology side of things, um first thing I picked up on is the earpods. Like
Yeah,
that's because obviously AirPods are a massive thing.
yeah,
You know, it's just like this idea is kind of ahead of its time, but it's also like how much did this episode influence Apple? Like it's
yeah,
weird. I mean I don't think it was a direct influence, but it's like an earpiece where you can listen to a whole load of information and a lot of people are getting it at the same time, and it's wireless and all this stuff, and it's kind
yeah.
of uncanny,
It's kind of
really.
the same vein as Star Trek predicting like touch screens as well. Like
Mm,
in the 60s like original run, they had everyone like was tapping on the screens and like everything. And then obviously fast forward like however many years, 40 years
Yeah.
sounds right. And then obviously we have touchscreens everywhere.
Well,
Um,
actually, Star Trek, the original series, the reason why we have mobile phones, like without any wires, is
yeah,
because of Star Trek, because they had the wireless communicators.
yeah.
And
Um,
someone watched that and was like, "Oh, I could try and
I
invent
could
that,"
do
and then
that.
they
Yeah.
did. So,
I think with the like AirPods, I think obviously they were like the doctor at one point even says Bluetooth. Like everyone in the 2000s with the Bluetooth headsets, like
yeah,
connected to the phones and everything. But obviously, very different ballpark from like direct streaming, like without the phone.
mm.
Um,
Yeah, it's
but
like
yeah,
that computer chip in your head kind of thing. Didn't
yeah,
wasn't there some sort of billionaire that wanted to do that? I can't remember which one it was, but
no, oh no, I know what you mean though. I heard about that as well.
yeah, and then it just kept failing, so they
Yeah,
scrapped it.
obviously.
Yeah.
Oh, I think it was Elon Musk.
Well, I feel like yeah, that makes
It's obviously going to
sense.
be Elon Musk, right?
That makes sense. Which actually, that reminded me of another point that I was going to make later. Is how much do you is with all of these billionaires at the moment making really weird decisions, whether it's the
Mm,
submarine or whether it's
yeah.
Musk with Twitter, how much do you think Lumic kind of fits into that mold? Because presumably he is a billionaire of some kind.
Mm. I think with what obviously when Mickey's down on Earth and he talks to the like army military guy or whatever, and
Mm,
he's like, oh yeah, like where have you been living up there with the toffs? So like it's obviously immediately like the only people in
yeah.
the like Zeppelins are the ones that can afford it,
Mm,
which I think kind of maybe we get some parallels with like the private jets like now because like presumably like Zeppelins aren't cheap to run and like they
yeah.
will produce a lot of pollution. Um, but I think Lumic obviously has the means to do what he's doing, but it comes from instead of more like a just because I can attitude of like
Yeah.
oh the guy that collects all the weeping angels in the Manhattans of New York. I can't remember what no, the Angels Take Manhattan.
Yeah,
That's
I
what
know
I
what
meant.
you mean. Yeah.
Manhattans of New York, outstanding. Um like instead of yeah, it being like a just because I can or like just because I want to, it's like self-preservation. It's a very human response to like finding out that you're dying. It's like, okay, well, I have the means to make sure I don't. But obviously, it gets a little bit hazy when he's like, and also everybody else will have the same thing, starting with the homeless people for some reason.
Yeah.
Um, I feel like that's maybe where I have some slight issues with the plot, but like not immensely, because obviously the easiest target, really, because you just go like it literally shows and it's so dark the way they do it. Like they just rock up a truck and they're
Mm.
like, we have food, and then just kidnap a bunch of people because obviously they know no one's gonna notice really. But obviously people do, but no one can do anything about it, if that makes sense.
Well, in a way, it does make sense in terms of the kidnapping homeless people because the rich, I mean, there's that thing all the time of, well, just make more money, just do that. And so they,
Yeah,
they view the homeless people as lazy. It is
yeah, like
so it,
expendable.
yeah, and they're also, as you said, no, they're less likely to be missed because they probably don't have any family or what family they do have, they don't talk to. And so it's a vulnerable population that they can exploit and they can do it
Yeah,
without many people really caring. Um, so actually that part of it I think is quite clever because I do think Lumic, as much as he is, I do think is genuinely a genius, he is also a sociopath. He does or a
yeah,
psychopath. He does not care about anyone else. He cares about himself and it doesn't matter what anyone else wants, he'll, do it anyway. I mean, we see
yeah.
it again and again with like the health code, the Geneva violating the Geneva Convention. Like
Killing
it's
literally the president of the United Kingdom
yeah,
as well.
it's that whole, I'm rich, I'm clever, I can do whatever the hell I want. It kind of like links back to the billionaires not caring about safety because they think they're above them, and some of them perish because of it. And I mean, it's weird how because I know when it comes to dystopian fiction, a lot of people go, "Oh, well, so and so predicted this." I mean, they say it all the times with things like The Simpsons.
Mm.
Um, but it's not because the writers predicted it, it's because they saw the things going on in the world, commented on it, or commented on what they thought it could be in the future if it kept going like this. And then that's what happened.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's history repeating itself because a lot of people, rich people, are that stupid in a way, you know.
Yeah.
So in terms of Cybus as a company, I mean, obviously the name is a very clear reference to Cyberman, but not only is it, I mean, we don't really know the name of the company until about maybe halfway through the episode. I think, if I'm not mistaken, the first time we actually see the name referenced is when Rose is looking at the news, and she's on her phone, and on the top of of her phone screen it says
Yeah.
Cybus. Um, and then shortly after that, in I think it's the news broadcast, they actually mention it for the first time. Um, so I mean, also whenever there's a Cyberman involved, up until that point, every time they kind of come near to showing what it is, they cut away. So that I guess anyone who hadn't seen the next time trailer on the previous episode wouldn't know necessarily that there was Cybermen in it. I mean, sure, reviews would have been a thing, but generally speaking, spoilers were slightly less easy to come across than it is
Yeah.
now. And then also on that news broadcast, there's a couple of references to Torchwood. So
Yeah.
clearly, Torchwood in this parallel universe is a lot more well known than the one in the main Doctor Who universe. Um, because they're supposedly a secret organization. I mean, it's more like an open secret in certain areas of the world, but seemingly in this, parallel world, there is well known an organization as things like the CIA and the FBI and MI6 and whatever.
Mm.
Because that's that one thing. 'Cause Russell in his series, he likes to foreshadow a lot, and there's always one
Yeah.
thing that he does. So obviously in season one it was Black Wolf, series two it's Torchwood. That's what is being foreshadowed because that's what get. I mean, we already saw the founding of it in Tooth and Claw,
Yeah.
Queen Victoria, and so and it is briefly mentioned in I think it's Bad Wolf when Rose is doing the weakest link. But it's not until the finale of the series that we see what Torchwood is today. Because we get hints of it in the Christmas invasion with the laser,
Mm.
destroying the ship. But, and then obviously we get the spin-off eventually.
Yeah.
Um, which I will get to covering on this podcast because after this I've done with series two. I'm doing series one of Torchwood and then series one of Sarah Jane Adventures, and then going back to Doctor Who again, in a
Nice.
rough kind of chronological order, like season by season. Because
Mm.
I'm not so anal that I'm going to split seasons up to make it 100%
Oh, yeah.
chronological. Like that would just be confusing. No, 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 no. But yeah. So now, in terms of how dark this episode is, I did remember the homeless stuff.
Yeah.
Like that is the bit that I remembered because
Yeah.
I always when I think of this episode, I think, oh, it was all right. I enjoy it, but it's not
Yeah.
amazing. Um, but I think it's the second episode is really good because the first one is a little bit lower in terms of because it's
Yeah.
doing a
It's
lot
like
of
mostly
setup.
exposition. Yeah.
Exactly, but I don't think it's badly written exposition. I think it's well done,
Yeah.
but there's just a lot of it. I think that's the main
Yeah.
problem, if
Like,
it really is a problem. Like there are possibly a couple of things, a couple of lines, a couple of bits they could have maybe gotten rid of, but for the most part, it needs to be there. It's justified. Whereas the second one, second episode, it's Age of Steel is a lot more emotional. I mean, that whole thing with the Cybermen at the end, the one where, the doctor's in the tunnel with Mrs.
Um,
Moore.
yeah, I
And
did not remember that.
no, I've forgotten. It was I know that the emotional inhibitor was a big thing
Yeah,
because that's how they defeated them. But I had forgotten how emotional, because there's 2 points. There's the one with the Cybermen, as I've just mentioned, in the tunnel where they accidentally turned the emotional inhibitor off, and it's this woman who is clearly, it's the day before her wedding.
yeah,
She's saying that, she's talking about, where she's asking where her fiance is and that he can't see her, not because
so
obviously she doesn't realize what she looks like right now, but because it's unlucky. And then there's the whole why am I cold? Like, oh, that that
trauma.
that was a bit of a gut punch, not gonna lie. And then of course that later on when they're all going insane, you've got that Cyberman turning and seeing their reflection and just putting the hand up, and
Literally,
the doctor's just, I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. And it's just like, oh my God, I'd forgotten.
literally, like you don't remember it being as dark as it is until you're
No.
watching it, and then like you're realizing, like like how much pain these people must be in, because
Yeah.
like literally at the beginning of the first episode, he says like the brain is fused to the exoskeleton.
Mm.
So I mean, like you can imagine how absolutely agonizing that must be for them. And to suddenly be aware of the fact that like all is left of them is their brain and their nervous system.
Yeah.
Like not even just like the pain of it, but like your body would go into shock. Like you wouldn't even realize what's happening, and to look up into the mirror and realize that that's what you now look like and there's like nothing you can do about it.
Mm.
Heavy.
Yeah, because I don't think the Cybermen have ever been that dark since, other than World Enough in Time, the Doctor Falls,
Mm,
with Bill and all that, not to spoil
yeah.
anything, because I think the Mondasian Cybermen, because I was never really scared of the metal Cybermen personally, but the Mondasian ones do creep me out a lot because they look
Yeah.
human.
Human. Yeah.
Because I think the Cybermen are at their best when people remember that they are actually human, because the amount of like Ashed in series 12 was pretty good. Lisa in Cyberwoman, in Torchwood, that's less good. I mean, the actual story was decent. It was just the design is so
Yeah.
bad. Um,
I think it's sort of like a similar problem with Weeping Angels, and like
mm,
obviously the more you use them, the more people are like expected to kind of up the ante a bit. So they kind of get a bit silly almost, like in um the newest um like episode when they suddenly, I think it was the newest one, when they like suddenly could travel super fast and they were like kind of flash running, I think.
oh, it was that was back in Nightmare in Silver.
Yes.
With
One.
yeah, they look kind of like Iron Man, but
Yeah, and
because
it's like,
they don't really acknowledge that these are humans, because
yeah,
that's when they're the scariest, and that's when, because it's like, oh, but this could happen to us, and it's like the existentialism of it. um
or it's and obviously the Peter Capaldi story when they like kill off Bill, um
yeah,
and like the kind of the part of that story that makes it so like ominous is like no matter how far they go, the Cybermen will eventually catch up with them.
yeah.
Like it's inevitable. And I think just like again, because they like kind of bring back the Mondasian design, it
Mm,
is so much more creepy because like you can really clearly see like it's people, like it's weird metallic people that are creeping up on you. And I think a lot of the problems with the Cybermen is people often kind of forget the men part of it and it's focused on the cyber. But I think that's something that these episodes did really well, specifically Age of Steel, because like it's kind of poignant, like how much focus there is on kind of the loss of humanity, but also kind of humanity prevailing despite itself, if that makes sense.
Mm,
But yeah, so very much darker than I remember it being.
mm. Another thing I think was interesting is how much of a comment on technology it is in a way, because it feels like this could be a Black Mirror episode quite easily.
Yeah,
Not I haven't actually watched Black Mirror, but because a lot of their earlier seasons focused on technology. And there's a lot of how the doctor's commenting on, oh, well, you're all a bit like sheep, you're always wanting the latest train, the latest upgrade. I mean, you think about
yeah,
it, how, the Cybermen are always talking about upgrades, and then you think of like phone plans and things, and how there are some people out there that, regardless of whether or not they can afford it, as soon as the new iPhone comes out, I'm
yeah.
gonna
It's like
get that.
yeah,
Um, there is a definite kind of, following each other like sheep herd
yeah,
mentality of, just because this is because a lot of people are doing it, just because it's popular doesn't mean it's good.
yeah. And I think there's something. I think it's Pete says it to Jackie when he says like, oh, like something about like she always needs to have the latest thing because like she says like her AirPods were like specially like hand delivered from John Lumick and like it's got like diamonds in them and
Yeah.
everything. And he's like, oh, like you always have to have like the newest thing. And it's
Mm,
so like I think there's like with like new phones again, like there's some that like fold in half and it's like but like
yeah.
sideways. Like why would you need why would you need that? It's like a tablet and then but yeah, I think it's like very not necessarily heavy-handed with the topic, but like it's very prominent like throughout the whole thing. And I think again, I think it handles like it quite well. But it's like it's always there throughout it. Like it's very difficult to forget, oh, this is about technology.
Mm. There's not a lot of points in this episode that I would say are ridiculously comedic, because I know that Russell's the writer likes to combine a little bit of comedy in his drama, just to, lighten the mood, to kind
Yeah.
of, because,
I
even in tragedy, there's always some irony to things.
yeah, I guess like the closest to comedy they come in the episode is like where with Dog Rose when Rose realizes
Yeah,
she does exist in this universe but as a dog and like the doctor's like finds it really funny but obviously
yeah.
she doesn't.
Mm. I mean, the thing I was actually thinking of is when they're showing the first conversion of all the, I think it was the homeless
Yeah,
people, and then they turn on In the Jungle to cover up the
yeah,
screams, and I was like,
absolutely insane. I was watching it like obviously like when I was preparing for it and I was like I
yeah,
do not remember that happening at
no,
all.
no,
But it's like in uh what is it the one with the master
that's what I was thinking of. Yeah.
when it's a voodoo child and he's like watching the decimation of the earth.
Well,
Like
there's that. There's definitely that, and also I can't decide as well in the next episode,
yeah,
right at the start. But actually, I was thinking of, in that same episode when the journalist it comes to the Lucy Saxon with information, and then then they go into the next room, and you can hear her screaming, and he keeps opening up the door and then closing it and opening it
yeah,
and closing it. The screaming, it's that same kind of thing because. I think it's because Russell, given that it's a family show, I don't think he would have gotten away with that kind of scene if they hadn't kind of played it for laughs. Because, you know, having not necessarily this the in the jungle scene, because honestly, didn't really remember it, but certainly with the one with the master where he opens and closes the door, I
Mm.
mean, it's not until now as I'm older that I realise how horrific that scene is because you're focused on the comedy aspect, not
Yeah.
the horrendous atrocity that's going on in the background.
It's like when you're watching it, like obviously I watched it when I was about like 8, 9. So I was
Yeah.
like, this is really funny. Like that's so he's so silly. And then like you watch it a couple of years later and you're like, my God, what were they doing to that woman?
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, I think it's maybe that's like obviously slightly different to kind of using in the jungle to drown out the screams of
Yeah.
people in agony. But like it's still kind of like just the sheer absurdness, like this the absurdity of it, like kind of still makes you laugh at it, but like you feel bad for laughing because
Yeah.
like these people are in agony. Like it's kind of funny.
Going back to Mrs. Moore, because we haven't really mentioned her that much. We haven't, I mean, we've mentioned it, but we haven't gone into detail about what she's like as a character. Because obviously she only appears in these two episodes because she gets killed off.
Yeah,
Um, quite dramatically actually, because I did remember that she gets killed, but I'd forgotten how sudden it is.
yeah,
Because I knew that she and the doctor had like some sort of heart to heart, but then suddenly, the camera, because of the angle, you don't see the Cyberman coming up,
yeah.
and then suddenly she's being electrocuted, and you're like, oh my god, like it is a bit of a jump scare. Um,
It's I think it almost kind of balances out with what she does to because obviously she kills the Cyberman like that they then accidentally turn off her emotional inhibitor. I think her name was Sally.
yeah,
Um so like in that sense it's kind of almost like an eye for an eye type situation because it's like well you killed one of ours, we kill you. But like as the doctor says, like they didn't need to kill her. There was like they could have because like they quite easily made the doctor like go along with them. Like they quite easily took him with them. They didn't really need to kill her. It kind of felt like a kind of almost like a look what we could do
yeah,
type of thing.
and I guess it's raising the stakes, showing that technically no one is safe. I mean,
Yeah.
we know that obviously the
Yeah.
Doctor and
Like
Rose aren't going to die, but you know,
it's still kind of like that sense of tension like in it, even if it is like inevitably, nothing bad is gonna happen to like the Doctor and Rose and like I guess it also extends to Mickey because like technically nothing bad happens to him. He just decides to stay behind.
yeah,
But I think like number one warning sign for me that she was going to die is she told the doctor her name. She had a heart to heart with the doctor, which you should never
yeah.
do.
Well, because it builds sympathy. Like Russell is
Yeah,
very good at building sympathy for minor characters, and I think Moffat does it quite well as well. But I think Russell is the master of it
yeah,
because I mean I've read his book, The Writer's Tale, that he did with Benjamin Cook that is talking about. I mean, it's emails that they exchanged as he was writing series 4 of the show, and he was talking about how the easiest way to build sympathy or to the character or to flesh out a character is to kind of base them on a loose stereotype in a way.
yeah,
Like, if you've got like a character that you're supposed to hate, like Van Staten, for example, then make them almost cartoonishly annoying.
yeah,
Not to the point where you're going sitting there thinking, oh, that's cartoonish, but to the point of, you know, you've only got a very short space of time to tell the audience who this person is, so you've got to
yeah,
exaggerate some elements of them. They're not going to be the most nuanced character you're ever going to have. But I think with Mrs. Moore, aka Angela Price, he does it very well. I mean, there's that whole thing of how she was just a regular person working in, I think it was a factory, did she say, or something? And she
so yeah, it was like a manual labor job.
for
Um,
for Cybers Industries, and
yeah,
she happened upon a document, and then because of that. she had a whole load of people, knocking on her door, you know, endangering her safety. So she faked her own death. Like her husband, her children think she is dead. Like
Yeah.
that's horrific.
And I think also it kind of explains the role she has in like the dynamic of the three as well. Like
Yeah,
obviously Jake and Mickey are really close in age, but kind of she it's not like explicitly said like, oh, she's like the mum of the group, but like
yeah,
you can kind of see that she automatically takes on not necessarily a leadership role, but like a responsible role in the group. And like once she has that conversation with the doctor and you realize like, oh, she has children of her own, like it's really obvious why it's like that. But
yeah,
I think obviously like it was like a complete shock, like kill. And I think you kind of do lose a sense of like not you don't like feel less bad about it that it happened the way it did, but like it's kind of you don't have time to process like oh no she's like died, like she was a really cool character and now she's dead. It was kind of just she's dead and now the doctor's been kidnapped. Like it kind of felt like very abrupt, which like obviously is kind of the point of it,
yeah.
but like I don't really know
Yeah,
how
I
to.
guess the point of it is that, because anyone can be a victim of it, that, life is short, it could go like that. And it's
Hmm.
um
And like also maybe to show the parallels like between like how the Cybermen are still human and like they can still die, but so can we almost.
yeah, or I guess how little remorse the Cybermen have, because obviously they don't have their emotions turned on. They can't
Yeah,
feel in the same way we do, so that people, ordinary people who've been turned into Cybermen can suddenly become killers
yeah,
because they don't really have full control over their actions
yeah.
because they don't have the full perspective.
It's kind of like how like technically like this can sound really weird, like humans have like the capacity to like just bite fingers off like with like the pure strength of like jaw and everything, but
Yeah,
like we don't because there's something stopping us, but they don't have
yeah.
anything stopping them.
No, I know what you mean. Like, because I've heard that in discussion with about zombies and things.
Yeah,
Yeah,
like it explains like where the strength comes from, not even just like from like physically, but like because obviously physically they are made of metal, but like
yeah,
emotionally there's nothing there, so there's nothing
exactly.
stopping them from committing like awful crimes like murder.
Mm. One thing about I think going back to John Lumick,
Hmm.
because we know that by the end of the episode, obviously the whole theme is he's dying, he's got some kind of terminal illness, we're not sure what. Um, and so he's created the Cybermen so he can potentially live forever.
Yeah,
And then it's decided, oh, because I'm going to do that, I'm going to make the rest of the world also do that.
yeah,
But also, and how, but he's also, it's interesting how, he gets wounded by his former um associate. Um,
yeah,
and then because of that, the Cybermen are like, oh, you're dying quicker anyway. And he's like, no, 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 not until my last breath. And like, no, we're going to convert you now. And so they convert him
yeah,
straight away. And he becomes the cyber controller. But interesting enough, it's not just Nick, because Nicholas Briggs voices all the Cybermen in the new series, except
yeah,
for Ashad, um, who's his own and is a separate actor. Um, but in the case of John Lumick, not only is Nicholas Briggs voicing him, but you can also, if you listen very carefully, hear the original actor's voice in there as well. It's like
yeah,
it's a dual tone. I don't know. That's probably not the
yeah,
word. You know what I mean?
yeah. I think like that kind of adds to how ominous it like really is. Like
Mm,
it's kind of especially with him kind of at the last moment thinking, hang on a minute, like let's not be hasty here. And then they're like,
yeah,
no. it's now, and then obviously you see him and he's this huge like pillar of metal, and I think kind of
Mm,
having the two conflicting voices shows how almost like no matter how hard he tries, he is still partially human,
yes.
which is obviously echoed by the way he kind of dies later. Um, I think it's again this episode's the it's just very dark.
Yeah. I mean, I often, it's also interesting how when the emotional inhibitors are turned off for everyone, he's the only one who doesn't go insane. Now,
Yeah,
that you could argue that's because maybe he's already insane by the time we get to this point in the episode, but also because he's the only person who consented to getting converted, at least eventually. So he
yeah,
somewhat expected it. So he, he's the only person who's really aware. And so, but also you could argue he probably doesn't have very much empathy anyway. And
mm,
so the emotional inhibitor doesn't really seem to have changed very much, except maybe he's now a bit more determined and a bit more angry.
yeah. I think you could maybe even argue that he like perhaps doesn't really have one in the first place because his issue wasn't so much with like the emotional side of humanity but more like the physical,
Mm.
like kind of what he saw as like weaknesses. um so like it is maybe possible that he didn't necessarily have an emotional inhibitor
But you've
like.
got to, yeah, I do understand that, but also the doctor mentions a couple of times that he'd been anyone who'd been converted would be in incredible pain constantly. So I almost kind of think he must have had one.
But also he was like he must have been in immense pain at the end of his life
Yeah,
anyway, the way that he was like very slowly dying from like what we can only assume is some kind of a respiratory like illness, kind of
yeah,
autoimmune whatever. um so like it's maybe possible, or like he had like a partial emotional inhibitor. maybe
mm,
he maybe his was already corrupt when he went in, who knows.
yeah.
But I think yeah, he's just a very creepy, ominous bad guy.
Yeah, I'm thinking about like in terms of parallels, like Davros, because they're both in kind of almost wheelchair type things, and they're both creators of their respective race. Now, I don't think Davros had any kind of terminal illness. That's not why he created the Daleks, but there's still a lot of parallels in terms of they created, metal beings created out of their own races
Yeah,
who have very limited emotion, who are kind of robotic, and are often used as allegories for other things going on. Like the Daleks were originally
yeah.
created as an allegory for the Nazis, um, and things like that. And so, they're also both mad scientists. There's a lot of parallels between those two, and I just part of me wonders if that was subconscious because I don't think it would have been intentional. Because I think the last thing they'd want to do is create this big bad character to rival Davros because that's such an iconic character.
Yeah.
But it but I guess also because Lumic is only in these two episodes that maybe they didn't worry about it too much.
I mean, it it's possible it could have been intentional, like with like the ending of this season in mind, like with kind of the Dalek Cybermen, like not will kind of team up, kind of not. Like it's kind of
Well, it's more like a civil war in a way between the
yeah.
two, and the humans just kind of caught in the middle.
I think like it's possible to show like kind of a familiar starting of kind of that kind of a race. Like we know how Davros started the Daleks, so now we know how Lumic started the Cybermen, and it's kind of like maybe to show that obviously they're not entirely different because
Yeah.
their similarities lie with like the lack of emotion and the sheer force of evil that
Mm,
they have.
yeah.
But yeah, like as you said though, like it's entirely possible it could have just been subconscious because like it's a very big stretch for them to intentionally make, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So what did you rate this episode out of 10?
Um,
Or this
I
two-parter, I should say.
yeah, I rated them separately to begin with because I think
Mm,
I gave Rise of the Cybermen a 7 out of 10 because honestly, I don't think I could have rated it lower than that because I think it
mm,
is um like as a whole the two-parter is excellent.
mm,
Um, but obviously with the main like the first half being mainly build up and then the second half is just fallout.
mm,
So I gave Age of Steel an 8 out of 10 and like overall it's an 8 out of 10. But I think
yeah.
like obviously it's balanced quite well, but like there's not as much like kind of meat in the first one.
Mm. Yeah, I went 6 for Rise of Cybermen, 7 for Age of Steel with a I mean, I feel like I should go for 6.5 overall because that's the average. Because if it had all been like the standard of the second episode, it probably would end up as a 7.5. But I just the first episode because it's quite slow
Yeah,
in parts because it needs to get going. I didn't feel like I could rate it a full 7.
yeah.
So I'm thinking 6.5 is an average. But I do
Mhm.
think it's a lot better than a lot of people give it credit for.
Yeah. It's one of my favorite two-parters just for I think it's such a nice like kind of send off like
Mm,
for Mickey. And I
yeah,
think like obviously it sets up kind of background for later episodes, like obviously
yes,
when Rose gets trapped back there. And I think like obviously after an episode like The Girl in the Fireplace, like it's gonna be difficult to follow that because that was so outstanding. But I
yeah,
think it does it really well. And I think if you view it like kind of overall as well, it
mm,
definitely works a lot better than some people think it does.
yeah.
Personally, is what I think.
No, I agree. Okay, well, that's all for today's episode. Hope to see you next time when we review The Idiot's Lantern.